What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series, we are going to be going over the pause menu. So as we continue to improve our game here, we're finding little things that are very useful to have and that we haven't implemented yet, one of which will be the pause menu. So right now, if I want to exit out of the game, I have no way to do so. I have to wait for the timer to finish or the round to end, and then I can choose a few options, or I have to close everything and relaunch it in the editor. That can take a lot of time. I have to set it up each time I want to test something. I don't have a way to get back to our menu. So in today's episode, we're going to be going over creating a pause menu, triggering it with a button press, and then being able to exit back to our main menu with that pause menu. Of course, the pause menu will have more options later, and we can set up some of them now as placeholders. But the main thing we want to be able to do is get from the game to the pause menu. So before you hop into this episode of creating the pause menu, if you want to get caught up in everything else you see in today's episode, such as our different characters, controlling them through the keyboard or one input device, and our HUD, I'll link you to the top right corner right here, which is the entire Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series that we have, so you can see how to do everything that we've done so far in this series. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about the pause menu, I still recommend you watch how we create the main menu, because we're going to be using a lot of the same techniques in navigating that menu and setting up the design of that menu. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be creating the blueprint widget for the pause menu today, and we'll add some very basic behavior in it. So it's all going to be in the blueprint. First thing we're going to want to do is create our pause menu widget. So I'm going to go to Blueprints, Functional BPs, Widgets, Menus. And you'll notice here we have this match over menu. This match over menu basically has everything we want to do for our pause menu right now, and the design is pretty similar too. So where we're accessing it from is going to be a little bit different, and the options we have are going to be different. But we can use this as a starting point if you followed this in the series. If not, I'm still going to go over the whole thing with you, so it's not a problem if you haven't. I'm going to make my blueprint widget in here. So add user interface widget blueprint. Using a standard user widget here is perfectly good. We don't need to do anything more than that. And we can go pause menu. Then we can go into our pause menu. And the first thing we're going to want is some sort of container for our widget. It could be a canvas panel. It could be an overlay. Whatever you want to use will work. Now I'm doing this in Unreal Engine 5, so when we start with a user widget, we don't have anything here, but if you are in Unreal Engine 4, you will have a canvas panel by default. So for today's episode, let's use a canvas panel. So I can go to my palette up here and type canvas panel and add it to the pause menu widget. Again, if you're in the UE4, you already have this, so you don't have to do it. You should have one here. You don't have to change anything about the canvas panel itself. This is really just a container for all of our other widgets. Feel free to modify it to your liking, but I'm going to leave it as is. First thing I want to do in here is have a title for our widget. So I'm going to add a text element to our canvas panel, and I'm calling it pause menu text. And we can anchor it to the top center here. That way all of our values are going from this point. I will then reset the position X to be 0, position Y. I will update this to be 100 is typically a good value to use. That way there's a little bit of offset from the top. For the alignment, I like to do 0.5 and 0.5. That way these values are working off of the center of the text box, not the top left, which is the origin. And since this text is probably never going to change, we can go ahead and click size to content, which will make this box as big as whatever text we put in here. If you had this text changing frequently, you might want to define a specific size. That way it doesn't go above a certain amount of characters or doesn't intersect with other parts of the pause menu, but it's not going to be a big deal for us. So we can just say pause menu or just pause. And at this point we can go and change all of our settings for everything here. So I can go to my font and I can change my size. I'd like to use 72 for my titles. And I'd like to set my outline size to 4. These are my personal preferences. You do not have to do this, obviously. Make this look how you want. And feel free to change anything else, but that will be good enough for me. So this is our pause menu text. And then from here, we will want our buttons. I like to use standard buttons in Unreal. So I drag them to my canvas panel here and I have button 52. I'm going to rename this to whatever the name of the button will be. So our first button here, I can say rematch button. So now I can choose where I want to put this. So I'll go ahead and stick with the theme that we have, so I will anchor it to the top, and I will change the position to 0 here, the alignment to 0.5 and 0.5. For the size, I will make it something like 200, 250, 300, depending on what I want. And for the position, I will just add position Y of like 300, just so it's below the pause menu, but still centered. Then I probably want to make this size Y bigger as well. 50 is probably a good number. And actually, let's do like 75. That seems pretty reasonable. A lot bigger now. For the image here, in the style section of the button, I want to make sure that I line it up with our other images that we've used for our buttons on other menus, like the match over menu. Again, I'm using this one for reference so that the menus look very similar, and I can stay with the current theme. So for this, I have what I call a main menu gray button. That is the standard for this. So there we go. Now I want to add text to this button, so I can add a text widget right on top of the button to make a child. And I like to call these ones like name of button text, or in this case rematch button text. And I'm going to rename the text element in here to just say rematch instead of text block. I would say like 36 for the font, and then give it an outline size of 2. Now I have a rematch button. These are pretty much the standard values I always use, so you're going to notice that I use these values in all my different series if you're someone who watches a lot of the channel. Of course, make it match your game and what you want it to look like. At this point, let's add another button to our canvas panel, and this can be our quit button, or return to main menu button, whatever we want to call this. So I will say main menu button, just like the match over screen has. For anchor, we will do top center, set the position to 0, set the position Y to 500, set the size X to be 300, set the size Y to be 75 so it matches our other button, set the alignment to be 0.5 for each. Now for the image, you could just do the main menu gray button again. I had made the button on the match over menu this red button. You don't have to do that. It's up to you. You could use the hover variant. It really doesn't matter how you set it up here. It is all personal preference. And now we have our image in here. We want to add our text element to it. And we have main menu text. And we just want to say main menu. And we're going to change the outline size to 2 and the size of the text to 36. And there we go. We have our buttons with our text. Now also on the match over menu, I had an image which I call background image. So I can drag an image onto my canvas panel. I can call it background image. I don't need it to be a variable. I can anchor it to the bottom right option here, which is the entire size of the container, and I can set the offsets to be 0. Then I can set the Z order to be -1, so it renders behind everything. And then you can choose whatever colors or image that you want for this. So I don't have an image in mind for this right now. What I like to do is typically change the tint or the color and opacity to a certain value. So I'll typically just do tint of RGB of 0, then alpha of 0.5, so it is transparent. Semi-transparent, halfway transparent, and then we have our menu here. And again, this is going to look very similar to our match over menu. In fact, they're pretty much identical. I'm doing this on purpose because I want them to look the same, but I still wanted to go over it with all of you in case you wanted to set up yours in a different way and use mine for reference. And I didn't want you having to reference another menu that we have in a different episode to accomplish this. So now we have our pause menu. At this point, we can go into our graph and we can start filling out the logic in here. So I remove all the temporary events that are in there. They are good starting places, but we know exactly what we want. We don't need them in here. And for today's episode, to make sure everything works, what I want to do is have these buttons bound to actions. And before we actually implement any logic here, I do want to add a resume button. I think it makes sense to have this. I did go back and forth, but I still think there should be a button for it, even if there is an input. So I'm going to move my buttons down 200 units. So main menu, new position Y is going to be 700. Rematch, new position Y is going to be 500. And I'm going to add a new button here. You can copy one of your other buttons if you want. And I will just make sure it's in the right spot in the list to stay consistent. And I will update my position X to be 0. Position Y is now going to be 300. And everything else here is probably good. I am going to go and rename this to resume button. And then the text is going to be resume button text. And we're going to change the actual text to resume, which is basically just unpause the game. If we go back into the graph, we can click on our buttons in here, such as the resume button, and scroll down to the event list here in the details panel. The one we want is on press because this will handle any type of press event. This could be a click, this could be inputs from a gamepad. When we're pressing this button, we can execute logic. So for today's episode specifically, the resume button is just going to be removing the widget from the parent. Remove from parent. This means that the menu will go away. We will also need to reset the time dilation to make sure it goes back to the default when we unpause the game. We don't have to worry about that for today's episode. We want to add our on-pressed events for the other buttons as well, so rematch and main menu. And main menu is very easy. We just want to open up the main menu level. That's pretty much it. So we can call open level by name, main menu. That is our level. We can see it here. And when we press this, we will exit and go to the main menu. The last one we have here is our rematch button. So we did something similar in the match over menu yet again, and I'm going to mimic that behavior here. So to do so, we are going to need our event construct. This event fires whenever the widget is created. So when we're pulling out the pause menu because we press an input, this will fire. And in here, we will want to grab our game instance and get a reference to our base game instance. That way we can use it throughout this menu. So I am going to right click and type get game instance. Drag off of that and cast it to our game instance for our project, which is our base game instance. If that cast succeeds, I am going to promote the result to a variable, or you can just go make a new base game instance variable object reference and set it to the result of this cast. We'll call this new variable base game instance ref or game instance ref. Now at this point we have this variable that we can use throughout the menu, assuming this succeeds, but it should, as long as we've done everything correctly. Then we can go down to our rematch button event and we can get our game instance ref either by dragging it or by typing it in. And we can convert it to a validated get. That way we know it's valid and has a valid value before we use it, so we avoid crashes and such. Our game instance reference has something called a level type that we set up earlier in the series. The level type basically is just what level are we on. It's an enum value that stores the 3 levels we have right now, which is none, which would be for our menus, our training room, and our training room 2. Training room 1 is the side-scroller example map that came with the side-scroller template, and training room 2 is the custom level that we created. I just want to open the level matching the level type, so if it's none, I am going to open a level. It's going to be the main menu. That way, if anything goes wrong, we don't lock the player into the game. They can still return to the main menu. If it's training room 1, I will type in side-scroller example map, which you can see at this path in this section in our project. That's how I got the name for that. And the other one is our training room, which I have for my maps folder. Go back to the blueprint, hook it all up, and you're good to go. Anyway guys, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed creating the pause menu for your Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter game. If you did, please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord subscriptions to benefit the channel and see some cool new rewards you can get along the way. Thank you to everyone who already has. If you ran into any problems with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.